Hello, patriots, praying citizens, and truth seekers. Today is Thursday, October 31st, 2019. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it, no matter what the witches are planning for Donald Trump. Now, before we get into the video, I just want to explain a little bit about the title. I didn't really know what to call it because we're talking about this vote today, which is basically the Schiff Empowerment Act. We'll be looking at a man hiding out in the White House, otherwise known as Eric Ciaramella, or Charlie the Spy, and we'll look at some old Q posts decoding the Y, which is a tweet from President Trump today that was missing the Y. And we'll look at some of the rant lines and some of the ley lines that connect with a story from the Bible, and I'm going to tie it all together in a nice little bow at the end. So let's get started. Now, first is a tweet from the Associated Press. A sharply divided House approves the rules for its impeachment inquiry of President Trump. The near party line 232 to 196 roll call was the chamber's first formal vote on a process that's likely to take months, possibly stretching into the 2020 election year. Okay, so let's decode this. This near party line means that two Democrats voted with the Republicans against this process. And hearkening back to Nancy Pelosi, she said, "I'm not for impeachment without bipartisan support." Well, guess what, Nancy? You didn't get it, and we're going to hold you accountable for this. I also want to tell you guys about a little feature I'll do tomorrow called Hypocrisy of the Week. There are already several candidates. I will put them forth tomorrow and allow all of you to vote and present any of your own. So keep your eyes open, and we will do that tomorrow, Friday. So why are we calling it the Schiff Empowerment Act? Well, that was actually something from the Washington Examiner. Britt Hume writes from the article, "Pelosi remains the ultimate authority, of course, but like a chairman of the board choosing a chief executive officer, she has picked Schiff to run the show, and in the resolution, Democrats will give him near total control." As Senator John Kennedy said yesterday, if you turn Nancy Pelosi upside down, Adam Schiff would fall out of her pockets. So Adam Schiff retains total control over everything in this inquiry, just like he's had already. He's deciding who can be called as a witness, what is released in any of the transcripts that would come out, and what is released as a final report. So even though he's allowing Republicans to call witnesses, he will be vetting those choices and vetoing any that he seems or deems inappropriate. It's completely a sham. Let's just remember that whatever happens, any form of impeachment would have to go to the Senate, where it will die on the vine. Now let's move into the next section where we will talk about the whistleblower, the first whistleblower that started this whole Ukraine question, and supposedly this is what the Democrats are basing their impeachment inquiry on. His name is Eric Ciaramella. And is it possible that because he was just doxxed recently, that pulled the trigger to this vote in the House? Patrick Howley writes about Mark Zaid, who is Eric Ciaramella's lawyer, or supposedly the lawyer for the whistleblower. He says, "Mark Zaid knows I have the full dossier on Eric Ciaramella. As soon as they found out, Schiff changed his tune and said they don't need the whistleblower to testify, LOL. And they also just called the vote. So who is he?" Well, this is his picture. You can see he's sitting in a group with Melania Trump. Federal documents reveal that the 33-year-old Ciaramella is a registered Democrat held over from the Obama White House. He previously worked with former Vice President Biden, former CIA Director Brennan. He's a vocal critic of President Trump who helped initiate the Russia collusion investigation of the Trump campaign during the 2016 election. He is a protege of Susan Rice. He helped draft Susan Rice's anti-Trump talking points before the inauguration. He's a colleague and associate of Victoria Nuland. He was brought into the White House by H.R. McMaster. He may be one of the original leakers, or very possibly is, who told the media about classified conversations President Trump had with Russian diplomat Sergei Lavrov. He was involved in the 2016 correspondence about the $1 billion loan guarantee, which Joe Biden had held up pending the firing of prosecutor Viktor Shokin in Ukraine. Now, there's a little bit here from various sources. Politico reported on a Ukrainian-American woman who consulted for the DNC and met with top officials in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington in an effort to expose ties between Trump, his top campaign aide Paul Manafort, and Russia. The woman, Alexandra Chalupa, was paid $412,000 from 2004 to June of 2016 by the DNC. Eric Charmella invited Chalupa to meetings and events at the White House. This is according to Real Clear Investigations, documents confirming one occasion in November 2015. She also visited the White House with Ukrainian lobbyists seeking aid from Obama. Chalupa said she shared her findings with both the DNC and Hillary's campaign. Politico reports that Chalupa told a senior DNC official that when it came to Trump's campaign, quote, "I felt there was a Russia connection." Chalupa also said that the Ukrainian embassy worked directly with reporters digging for Trump-Russia ties. Before Charmella filed his whistleblower complaint, he sought guidance from House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff's staff and other Obama-era NSC staff recently employed by Schiff's office. Before this guidance was public knowledge, the chairman was adamant on hearing the whistleblower testimony. This is Schiff's quote, "We need to speak with the whistleblower." As soon as Charmella's partisanship and collaboration was discovered, Schiff and the Democrats flipped to preventing the testimony from happening and moving their hearings behind closed doors. Now, another thing to consider. Do you remember the opinion piece? This was in the New York Times, September 5th, 2018. "I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration." So I am wondering if Eric is the guy who wrote this opinion piece, because he had a very high-level job, although I wouldn't call him a senior level because he's 33. But anyway, he was very, you can see him sitting there next to or right behind Melania Trump. So is it him? Emerald Robinson wrote this, "Scoop, a publishing insider, tells me the anonymous author of the infamous Steady State New York Times op-ed most likely still works inside the Trump administration since the book contract is structured to avoid government legal jeopardy." All right, so Eric was employed in the White House. He then left his national security posting mid-2017 amid concerns about negative leaks to the media. He has since returned to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. So he's technically still inside the Trump administration. I'm just putting this out there. Let's look and see what this person in this opinion piece wrote. The tell-all claims there's a two-track presidency in place and that some of Trump's aides have gone to great lengths to keep bad decisions contained to the West Wing, though they are clearly not always successful. Quote, "It may be cold comfort in this chaotic era, but Americans should know that there are adults in the room," the author wrote. That, to me, that's just so smarmy and kind of a snotty remark that I can't see an older person writing, but maybe this young guy did. "We fully recognize what is happening, and we are trying to do what's right, even when Donald Trump won't." The column says that Trump's instability led to early whispers within the cabinet of invoking the 25th Amendment, which would start a complex process for removing the president. Take foreign policy. In public and in private, President Trump shows a preference for autocrats and dictators, such as President Vladimir Putin of Russia and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, and displays little genuine appreciation for the ties that bind us to allied, like-minded nations, the writer said. All right, so Rush Limbaugh calls this guy Eric Pajama Boy, and is it possible that that was him who wrote that op-ed? Well, I guess I don't know if we'll ever know. Next stop on our little journey is thanks to Paul Sperry and Dan Bongino. Put together, the two posit that Eric Chermella is Charlie, a spy referenced in tweets exchanged between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Now, this is text from a letter sent by Ron Johnson, Senator from Wisconsin, and Chuck Grassley, Senator from Iowa, to the Attorney General. They say, first, in the course of our oversight work, we have reviewed certain text messages that may show potential attempts by the FBI to conduct surveillance of President-elect Trump's transition team. In text messages exchanged between former FBI Special Agent Peter Strzok and former FBI attorney Lisa Page, the two discussed the possibility of developing, quote, potential relationships at a November 2016 FBI briefing for Presidential Transition Team staff. Specifically, it appears they discussed sending the CI guy to assess an unnamed person or persons' demeanor, but were concerned because it might be unusual for him to attend. A few weeks after the presidential election, Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page discussed the logistics for the briefing. Strzok and Page said the following. Strzok, talking with Bill, do we want Joe to go with Evanina instead of Charlie for a variety of reasons? Page, not sure. Would it be unusual to have blank show up again? Maybe another agent from the team? Strzok, or he's the CI guy, same, might blank make sense. He can assess if there are any news cues, maybe he means any new cues, or different demeanor. If Katie's husband is there, he can see if there are people we can develop for potential relationships. Page, should I ask Andy about it? Or Bill want to reach out for Andy? Strzok, I told him I'm sure we could ask you to make the swap if we thought it was smart. It's not until Monday, so Bill can always discuss with him tomorrow. The phrase we want to concentrate on is Katie's husband in this section, and then back here, Charlie right here. Now, Katie Seaman is one of the FBI's top counterintelligence analysts. Her husband is Joshua Pitcock, former chief of staff to Mike Pence. Katie worked for Peter Strzok as he was doing the sham investigation of Hillary, but recused herself from everything as soon as Trump's nomination in July of 2016. So in this exchange, Strzok and Page talk about developing sources or spies inside the Trump White House. They talk about a CI guy, and his name is Charlie. This is from April of this year from Jack Posobiec. He writes, White House aides are concerned former Pence Chief of Staff Joshua Pitcock may have left behind FBI listening devices after learning his wife worked for Peter Strzok. So it's all a very interesting web, and eventually this will come out because of the investigations being conducted by the Department of Justice. In this next section, let's look at ISIS and the recent death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. ISIS is confirming that he's dead, and they announce his successor, whose name is Abu Ibrahim al-Hashemi al-Quraishi. That's according to Reuters. Now, I thought you might appreciate this. This is released video from the Pentagon on the raid on Baghdadi. So here's the U.S. assault forces moving in. This is from this Department of Defense video. You can see them moving into the compound. Close air support engages hostile fighters, and they are going to be eliminated momentarily. Okay, and then the next one. shows us the compound, a more clear picture of it, and a very big explosion. After the exfiltration, a U.S. drone destroys the compound. There, the bombs went in, this missile strikes. Another view of the strike. Big cloud right there. The compound burns in the aftermath. And remember, they got the kids out, and just the ones that were left inside were the terrorists. Now remember, Nancy Pelosi and her friends went on a congressional junket over to the Middle East in the middle of the month. This is from Steve Hartigan, Food for Thought. And he's got an image here. Why was Nancy so upset about pulling out a few troops from Syria? Why did Nancy and friends run to Jordan just days before we hit Baghdadi? Did we really get cables showing communication between the U.S. State Department and Baghdadi? Then he writes, Nancy and friends went to Jordan on October 19th. Baghdadi said to be killed on October 26th. Trump said he was hard to pin down. It was hard to pin down the location because he would try to move, but then changed his mind. Spooked, more like it. Was Nancy spied on? And did she lead us to him? Think Q. Then there was this. Now this, I have no way of knowing if this is true, but I thought it was interesting for speculation. How would two senior U.S. Congress members explain their fingerprints on mugs inside the Syrian compound? They sneaked in during ceasefire, drank, dealed, and left. We pinged in, all done. The gallows are fast, eroding dignity can be an eternity. Confess, and the names of Pelosi and Schiff are in the middle there. Now, we did a little bit of a look and a decode at these two tweets by Donald Trump. And I have a great audience, and someone sent this to me in my email. His name is Where We Go When We Go All. Don't know what his real name is, but I wanted to bring it to you. So remember the word opposite. O-P-P-I-D-S-I-T-E, so opposite, but it's spelled wrong in Donald Trump's first tweet, and then that was on the 20th, and then on the second tweet, on the 29th, he has the same word again without the S in the brackets. So what was the difference? Was Nancy, she went there on, what, the 19th, and he was killed on the 26th, so here we have the 20th, which was very close to that first date, and then this one on the 29th, close to the second date. So does it work out like this? The letters are O-P-P and then I-D-S-I-T-E, Operation Pelosi, ID'd S, Syria, or site in Killbox. Very interesting, and thank you for to Where We Go When We Go All. All right, now I want to look at another decode. Donald Trump put out this tweet today. Congratulations to Fox News. You left CNN and MSNBC in the dust. That's because the don't tell the truth, or should be they, so we're missing a Y. And he reposted some cable news rankings from Sunday, and you can look at, who was first through 10th on here. I think that's all the numbers, and it's all Fox. So the Y is missing. Remember, Q told us about the owl and Y. Very beginning of the Q post, he kept mentioning owl and Y. So here's the Y. It's the Baphomet headdress, and it's always covered in gold, or in these pictures it is. And that's a very important part of it, and that Soros replaced the Y family. So now he is the Y. So Find the Keystone was in a companion post to that, and the words were called out with brackets, or excuse me, the letters. So CIA was the first set, and then PAY was the second set. Now, something that I've heard a prophetic pastor speak about is it possible that the false prophet in Revelation that is spoken about is really a group, and it would be the fake newscasters, and these would be the false prophets under the false prophet, whoever that is. And, I think it's very possible because of just the fact that without the help from the mainstream media, the Democrats couldn't get their message out. And the reason that we're even having these impeachment proceedings, whatever you want to call them, is because of the complicity of the mainstream media. All right, so getting back to the why, as part of this same batch of Q posts, I'm not going to go back through them, I've just kind of pulled some of the information out. It has to do with the Federal Reserve. Now today, President Trump tweeted this, reading from the bottom. People are very disappointed in Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. The Fed has called it wrong from the beginning. Too fast, too slow. They even tightened in the beginning. Others are running circles around them and laughing all the way to the bank. Dollar and rates are hurting our manufacturers. We should have lower interest rates than Germany, Japan, and all others. We are now by far the biggest and strongest country, but the Fed puts us at a competitive disadvantage. China is not our problem, the Federal Reserve is. We will win anyway. So Q asks us, this is November 2 years ago, to look back at the Titanic and the Hindenburg disaster. And the fact is that the Titanic sank April 15th, 1912. Isn't that interesting? That date is April 15th, tax day. And the Federal Reserve Act, which created the Fed, was voted by Congress, signed into law by Woodrow Wilson, December 23rd of 1913. Remember, taking this trip, we had J.P. Morgan was supposed to go but canceled. Martin Rothschild and his wife both survived, and Q says that the Titanic and the Hindenburg were both psyops. There were three men that were supposed to, or that wanted to keep us from getting involved with the Fed or that type of a system: Jacob Astor, Isa Strauss, and Benjamin Guggenheim, and all three of these men died when the Titanic sank. So, I don't know, this just kind of ties into this older Q posts talking about the why, talking about the Fed, and I wonder what's about to go down there. Now we're going to finish this up by looking at some networking. And when I say networking, I want you to think about the worst travesty happening in our country and around the world to the youngest members of the human race. And we're going to take a very brief look at this. I know for some of you who have dug deeper or have watched videos of people who really do a great job of exposing all of this, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm just wanting to give people that have never heard this before a brief look at some of these things. So we're going to look at rat lines, ley lines, and the Bible. And I'm going to finish up with a really cool Bible story for Halloween, if there is such a thing, and tie all of this together. So let's start with the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, or the VATT, which is located at Mount Graham, southeast Arizona. Now this shows you where some of these lines run. You've got the Solar Observatory Sunspot in New Mexico. Also on this map are two observatories. The one in Sunspot, New Mexico. Remember that one that was closed down and we were all wondering what happened there? And then this one in Marfa, Texas. Now these are, the lines are important, and I'll show you. These are the ley lines. Ley lines have spiritual significance for Native Americans and I'm sure other groups. Now these show the ley lines and that they cross right here. And look at what's going on around here. And I know some of you are saying, but this is occultic, this is not God, this is not the Bible. Okay, just hang with me, guys, all right? Marfa is a town in Texas, And the Cibolo Creek Ranch is very near there, and that's where Antonin Scalia died. The Marfa Lights and the Marfa Vortex are here. And you've got a Masonic Lodge in Alpine, Texas, which is close to there. Okay, and here's the southern border of the United States, kind of runs like this, and right over here where these little green trees are, this is a national forest at this bend, Big Bend in Texas. Okay, so back, I don't even remember when this was, but we had this observatory closed down, which is near Alamogordo, New Mexico. So here's the red star, and that's where it's at. That's Sunspot. And this is from a report that came out afterwards. The actual reason that that observatory was closed is that it was shut down due to criminal activity, specifically a child P investigation. The report said the FBI was investigating the activities of an individual who was utilizing the wireless internet service of the National Solar Observatory in Sunspot to download and distribute CP. Well, I don't believe that that's part of it, but I think there was a lot more going on, and I think it's very possible that there are tunnels under here that connect, because the enemy loves to use the sun, moon, and the stars for his own purposes. God created them and instructed them on what they should do, and the enemy has always been trying to subvert God's authority, cause people to worship those things, and this is all part of the enemy's plan. So when we look at this, we see this whole area is very specifically keyed in for the enemy. It doesn't mean you can't live there as a Christian. It doesn't mean that God's people are suppressed there, but it just means that the enemy prefers this area. And I'm going to get to that, like I said, in just a second with the Bible story. This next story dovetails. FTND, or Fight the New Drug, writes on Twitter, "Second, this last week, a missing 15-year-old girl was identified in 58 videos on this site called PORN.pub. The videos showed her being RAPED. Legally, this is both CP and ST. Yet, it made the top 5 on PORN.pub, and her legal name became a suggested search term." Lila Rose writes, "Horrible, shut it down. It's ST, it's ABUSE, profoundly harmful to users, and some of the most toxic influence in our culture today." Another story that dovetails. JetBlue flight attendant was busted for searching for SEX with a child. His name is Jeffrey Aronofsky, 53 years old, was taken into custody last Friday at a property in Lake Mary, Florida. In a complaint filed in the U.S. District Court, prosecutors allege he was planning to have SEX with an 8-year-old in front of his father, yet the father turned out to be an officer working for the FBI. Aronofsky is now being held at Orange County Jail on a charge of attempting to entice a minor for SEX. Okay, so this stuff is starting, as we've all said, is starting to come out. People are going to jail. And these hubs, such as these places and the rat lines that lead to them and through them, as here are some of these lines, they're going to be exposed, and this stuff is all going to end soon. Now I want to get to the Bible story, and it's a pretty simple one. If you've been around in Christianity for any amount of time, you have heard this before. And how I came to this Bible story is I just opened my Bible and there it was, and I believe God wanted me to share it with you. So it's a story of a man who was filled with devils. He was living in a cemetery, basically, living in one of the tombs that was carved out of the rock. And you can imagine that there were all kinds of outcasts living there. So he was alone, but not alone. He was surrounded by crazies. He himself was crazy. He couldn't be restrained. In fact, the devils that were in him were so powerful that no matter what kind of chains and fetters they put around him, he was able to instantly break through. But he would sit there and he would cry out and scrape himself and cut himself because he was so demonized. This is what it says in Mark 5:5, and always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice and said, What have I to do with you, Jesus, you Son of the Most High? I adjure you by God that you torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is your name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. So this guy was so demonized, they all called themselves Legion. And he besought Jesus much that he would not send the demons away out of the country. Okay, so speaking out of this guy's mouth is this band, this legion of demons, begging Jesus, don't send us away from here. We want to stay in this country, in this place. So when I read that and I thought about the areas of this country where there's more demonic influence, especially on a day like Halloween. You know, we have the enemy is very active and very busy, and his followers are also very busy worshiping him. So here's this guy, and he's full of these demons, and they don't want to be cast out of the country, and they say, send us into this herd of swine. So Jesus does. He sends them into the herd of swine. The swine are now demonized. They run over the cliff and drown. And that releases them again to just be free to go inhabit whoever they will, whoever they would have a legal right to inhabit. And the rest of the story is, they that fed the swine fled and told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that was done. And they came to Jesus to see him that was possessed with the devil, and had the legion sitting and clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And they that saw it told them how it befell to him that he was possessed with the devil, and also concerning the swine. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coasts. So here's this guy who's now in his right mind. Jesus has set him free from this legion, and the people around him didn't want anything to do with him. And so he comes to Jesus and he says, Jesus, please take me with you. But Jesus said, no, go home to your friends and tell them the great things the Lord has done for you and has had compassion on you. So the end of the story is, if you don't know Jesus, you need to meet him. You need to ask him into your heart, ask him to chase away your devils, repent of everything you've done that doesn't match up with the law of love and mercy and grace and the 10 Commandments, and allow Jesus to set you free. So, Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus, who subdued the devils. In fact, he freed people from everything that tormented them. So, Father, I pray that today would be a day that people would get set free from the enemy, not to give in to a spirit of fear and to be afraid, but to have a spirit of victory, because Jesus was victorious over death, hell, and the grave. And we think about these impeachment proceedings, or the Schiff Empowerment Act, Father, and it's not frightening because we know who's in control. We know that this is just a circus act. Father, reveal it for what it is to everyone, even those people that love Adam Schiff, that love Nancy Pelosi, and that think that the Democrat Party is doing great things for this country. Father, help them to see. Help it to just be so obvious that they cannot anymore say that these people make sense for the future. Father, we ask you to protect our president, keep that hedge of protection around him, keep him walking in the path that you've set for him, keep him humble, Father, keep him healthy and safe. We thank you for another day. Today is your day, Father. It's not the devil's day. We rejoice and we're glad in it. Thank you all so much. I will see you next time.